I stand in the parking lot at 6:47 a.m., staring at the building that used to be my second home. My hands rest on my 7-month belly as I watch the lights flicker on in the executive suite. They have no idea I'm here. They have no idea what's coming. But let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. 5 years ago, I walked into Data Stream Solutions as their director of operations. The company was bleeding money, drowning in inefficiencies, and 6 months from bankruptcy. The CEO, Richard Palmer, hired me with desperation in his eyes and promised me equity if I could turn things around. I worked 70-hour weeks. I restructured their entire supply chain, renegotiated contracts that saved them $2.3 million in the first year alone, and built relationships with clients who were ready to jump ship. I missed my sister's wedding because I was in Tokyo closing a deal that became their largest account. I canceled therapy appointments, skipped meals, and turned my apartment into a second office. By year 3, DataStream wasn't just surviving, we were thriving. Revenue jumped from $8 million to $34 million. I hired and trained a team of 12 people who worshipped the ground I walked on because I actually valued them. I created systems so efficient that our competitors started trying to poach our staff just to learn our secrets. Richard loved me then. He called me his secret weapon. He took me to investor meetings and bragged about my turnaround strategy. He promised me that VP position was mine within 2 years. Then I met James at an industry conference in Chicago. He was kind, funny, and didn't mind that I checked my phone every 20 minutes. We got married 14 months later in a small ceremony I planned entirely during lunch breaks. Richard gave a toast at our wedding about how lucky James was to marry someone so dedicated. I got pregnant last March. James and I had been trying for 8 months, and when that test showed positive, I cried in the bathroom of our office building. Happy tears, scared tears. I was 34 years old and finally building the family I dreamed about while building everyone else's companies. I told Richard at 2:15 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the exact time because I'd been rehearsing the conversation all morning. I brought projections showing how my maternity leave wouldn't impact our Q4 numbers. I had transition plans. I had trained my deputy, Marcus, to handle everything in my absence. Richard smiled. He shook my hand. He said, "Congratulations, Sarah. You deserve this happiness." His eyes said something else entirely. The next morning, I noticed Marcus getting called into more meetings without me. By Monday, Richard was CCing himself on my emails. By Wednesday, I was excluded from the quarterly strategy session I'd been leading for 3 years. "Just trying to reduce your stress," Richard said when I confronted him. "You need to think about the baby." I thought I was paranoid. I thought pregnancy hormones were making me suspicious. I kept working, kept proving myself, kept closing deals. In June, I landed the Meridian account, a $6.7 million contract that would carry us through the next 2 fiscal years. I worked through morning sickness so severe I kept a trash can under my desk. I worked through sciatic pain that made me cry during conference calls I couldn't miss. July 12th. I remember that date like I remember my own birthday now. I was 28 weeks pregnant. I walked into the office at 8 a.m. and found a termination letter on my desk. Restructuring, it said, terminated due to economic factors. My position, the position I created, the position that saved this company. I found Richard in his office, feet up on his desk, drinking coffee from the mug I gave him that said "World's Best Boss." The irony wasn't lost on me. "Richard, what is this?" He didn't even look uncomfortable. "Sarah, we've decided to move in a different direction. You'll receive 4 weeks severance. Clean out your desk by noon." 4 weeks? I've given you 5 years of my life. I built this company from the ground up. "You were an employee, Sarah. Employees are replaceable. We'll be fine." Is this because I'm pregnant? His jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation. We're terminating you for legitimate business reasons. I suggest you don't make this ugly." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth. He'd already decided. Probably decided the moment I told him about the baby. Probably decided that a pregnant woman couldn't be his secret weapon anymore. Probably decided that paying me maternity leave wasn't worth it when he could just eliminate me and redistribute my duties to Marcus for half the cost. I cleaned out my desk. 5 years in 3 cardboard boxes. My team stood in their cubicles watching in shocked silence. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. He'd known. They'd promoted him to my position that morning. I drove home at 11:30 a.m. and sat in my car for 2 hours, too numb to move. James found me there when he got home from work, still in my business clothes, hands on my belly, tears dried on my face. "We'll sue them," James said immediately. "This is pregnancy discrimination. This is illegal." But I'd signed an arbitration agreement when I started. Richard had been smart about that, and his brother-in-law was a corporate attorney who would bury us in legal fees we couldn't afford. I was 7 months pregnant with no income and no health insurance that would cover the birth. I spiraled. I applied to 43 jobs in 2 weeks. Nobody wanted to hire someone who would need maternity leave immediately. I was toxic. I was a liability. I was everything Richard had decided I was. My daughter Emma was born on September 3rd at 4:22 a.m. after 14 hours of labor. She was perfect. She was tiny, and I held her in that hospital room on Medicaid because we'd qualified after I lost my income, and I made her a promise. I promised her that her mother was not a victim. I promised her that people who throw you away don't get to win. I promised her that she would see what strength looks like. James went back to work after 2 weeks. I stayed home with Emma, but I wasn't just changing diapers and nursing. I was making phone calls. I was sending emails. I was reaching out to every contact I'd made in 15 years in this industry. I called Catherine Liu, the CEO of Meridian Corp., the account I'd landed for DataStream. We'd developed a real friendship during negotiations. "Catherine," I said, "I need to tell you something about DataStream." We talked for 90 minutes. I told her everything. I told her about the contract terms Richard had changed after I left, the corners he was cutting, the quality standards he was abandoning. I told her how Marcus, despite being a good guy, didn't understand the relationship dynamics that made our contract work. "He terminated you while you were pregnant?" Catherine's voice was ice. "Sarah, I built my company while I was a single mother. I know exactly what you're facing." 2 weeks later, Meridian pulled their contract. $6.7 million. Gone. They cited breach of agreed-upon terms, and they were right. I made 17 more calls. To clients, to vendors, to investors. Not to sabotage, I was careful about that, but to tell the truth about who had actually built the relationships they were relying on. To let them know that the institutional knowledge they valued was gone. By December, DataStream had lost 4 major accounts totaling $11.2 million. Their stock price, for those paying attention, had dropped 37%. Richard was panicking, cutting staff, making desperate moves that only made things worse. Meanwhile, I was building something new. I called my company Catalyst Operations. I brought in 3 former DataStream employees who'd quit in disgust after my firing. I brought in Catherine Liu as an investor and advisor. I brought in 5 clients who'd rather work with me than Richard. By Emma's first birthday, Catalyst was doing $8 million in revenue. By her second birthday, we'd hit $23 million. We were lean, efficient, and built on loyalty instead of exploitation. And Richard? Richard was drowning. DataStream's revenue had fallen to $19 million. They were defaulting on loans, they were facing lawsuits from clients over unmet obligations. The company I'd saved was dying, and this time nobody could resurrect it. Last month, I got a call from their bankruptcy trustee. DataStream was being liquidated, assets were being sold, and they had a buyer interested in acquiring the company, the client list, the intellectual property, everything. Who's the buyer? I asked. Catalyst Operations. Is that your company, Miss Chen? I smiled. Yes, it is. The acquisition closed on March 3rd. I paid $4.7 million for a company that had once been worth $50 million. I walked into that building, the building where I'd given everything, the building where I'd been thrown away as the owner. Richard was required to be there for the transition meeting. He sat at the conference table, the same table where he'd excluded me from meetings, and he looked 10 years older than the last time I'd seen him. Marcus sat beside him, pale and sweating. "Sarah," Richard said, "I'm glad we can put the past behind us, and no, we're not putting anything behind us. We're addressing it directly." I opened my folder. Inside were documents, lots of documents. I have here a full audit of the discriminatory practices at DataStream Solutions. My lawyers have documented everything: the timing of my termination, the elimination of my position followed by Marcus's immediate promotion to a role with my exact duties, the pattern of excluding pregnant employees from advancement opportunities, the 3 other women who were pushed out after pregnancy announcements. Did you think I wouldn't find them, Richard? His face went white. "You can't prove." "I can prove all of it. And here's what's going to happen. I'm acquiring this company. You're going to receive exactly 4 weeks of severance, the same amount I gave me. Marcus, you're fired effective immediately for complicity. And Richard, you're going to sign this agreement stating that you will never work in this industry again, or I will pursue every legal avenue available for what you did to me and to those other women." "You can't do this," Richard whispered. "I already have. Security will escort you out by noon. You have 3 hours to clean out your desk." I watched them pack their boxes. I watched them walk past the employees I was going to take care of properly. I watched them get into their cars in that same parking lot where I'd stood 7 months pregnant, fired and scared and broken. But I wasn't broken anymore. I was the CEO of a thriving company. I was the mother of a beautiful 2-year-old who would grow up knowing her mother fought back. I was the woman who turned devastating loss into unstoppable victory. That evening, I drove home to James and Emma. I'd framed my old termination letter and hung it in my office with a plaque underneath that read, "They tried to throw me away. I bought them instead." Emma ran to me at the door, arms up, shouting, "Mama!" I picked her up and held her close, breathing in the baby shampoo smell of her hair. "Did you have a good day, sweetie?" James asked, knowing what had happened. I looked at my daughter, at my husband, at the life we'd built from ashes and determination. "Yes," I said, "I had a very good day." Because here's what Richard never understood. You can't eliminate someone's value by terminating their position. You can't erase someone's worth with a severance check. And you definitely can't destroy someone who knows exactly what they're capable of. I was never the secret weapon. I was never the employee. I was always the force that made everything work. And now I owned it. They fired me for being pregnant. I came back and bought the whole company. And every day I walk into that building as CEO, I think about every woman who's been told she's replaceable, every person who's been thrown away when they became inconvenient, every parent who's been punished for choosing family. This is for all of us. This is proof that they don't get to win. This is proof that your value doesn't disappear when someone stops seeing it. This is proof that revenge, served patient and cold and absolutely devastating, is the sweetest thing in the world. I stand in my office now, looking out at the parking lot where this all began. The sun is setting, painting everything gold. I have 17 employees counting on me. I have clients who trust me. I have a daughter who will never wonder if her mother is strong enough. And I have a company that will never, ever fire someone for being pregnant. That's my legacy. That's my victory. That's my revenge.